Welcome to another NinjaOne webinar. My name is Jeff Hunter, and I am the field CTO here at NinjaOne. Now, today we'll be speaking on the topic of endpoint hardening, Windows endpoint hardening specifically. And endpoint hardening, just as a definition to get started, is just the practice of making a device more difficult to compromise. I think this is an interesting and nuanced discussion to have because it runs up against what I think is a common struggle in the IT industry. What happens when we have to implement security and that runs up against the needs of the business? We always want to make sure that we're secure, but obviously there are certain security measures that are difficult to implement because they can impact how the business is operating and affect their ability to make money. I think it's one thing to say, let's lock down everything, let's be extraordinarily secure. And it's another thing to actually deal with the repercussions and the effects of that particular action. Now, for starters, we think that there's pretty empirical evidence that regardless of whatever you're doing inside of NinjaOne, that your workflows, your processes become more efficient, and that quite simply, NinjaOne is enabling users to do more and do more faster. And one of those mores that they like to work on is delivering the fundamentals of device security. There's obviously a lot of functionality that rolls up into what you need in your endpoint management tool, but security usually ends up being a key factor. Effective patch management of both the operating system and third-party applications is probably the most bedrock security practice in the industry. Of course, being able to ensure that your EDR tool is in place and is providing active protection, that has essentially become a requirement for many people as well. And finally, configuring the device to make it more difficult to compromise, which is known as endpoint or device hardening. And so we're going to go ahead and pop a poll question up onto the screen real quick, just looking at, what are you doing today that you would like to do more, or what you would like to improve with regards to your endpoint security practice today. And we're excluding antivirus here just because it seems like, that's kind of table stakes at this point. So yeah, definitely interested to see what you have in place. Now let's go ahead and look at the practice of endpoint hardening. We kind of covered the dictionary definition already. It's the practice of making a device more difficult to compromise. And the next logical question that I usually hear there is why? Why do I take additional steps like this, especially if you're already using other security tools like an EDR tool? And the answer is we're just adding on additional layers of security, which I think makes a lot of sense. So an endpoint that is, or at least appears to be more difficult to compromise, is one that is less enticing to potentially malicious attackers. To use maybe a hacky metaphor, even if I had a state-of-the-art security system in my house, I'm still going to lock the front door. And so I would say that endpoint hardening is kind of akin to that lock on the front door, just making sure all your doors are locked before a potentially malicious attacker even, gets to the point where the EDR tool needs to deal with them. So my view, what we talk about today is going to supplement and bolster other security measures that are already in place. Endpoint hardening is an aspect of your security posture, and you need to have all the tools in your toolbox in order to be effective. Now, when I say endpoint hardening, what does that mean? That's kind of a generic term. By what standards are we determining if a device is secure or if it is not secure? And the answer is that you have your pick. There are any number of people out there, entities in the security space, who have put out standards for what should or should not be done to ensure that devices are protected. I know Microsoft puts out their own set of standards. The Center for Internet Security, or CIS, puts out their own standard. And of course, the DoD releases STIGs, or Security Technical Implementation Guides, offering guidance around how you should secure your devices. I am naming just a few here. There are any number of other entities, government entities. I think in Germany that BSI puts out their own as well, which we'll take a quick look at. But one thing I would say is that there's many overlapping criteria between all the various standards that are out there, where they say a lot of the same things, but there's also differences between them. And so I think that illustrates a very big point here, perhaps my last point here, which is careful planning is a must when you're implementing any sort of endpoint hardening. We should look at endpoint hardening as the fundamental act of making a device less compatible. And I would say that's a really good thing when you want to be less compatible with potentially hostile actors. But there is always going to be a bleed over effect into perfectly legitimate applications. A good example might be disabling weak TLS. And we'd say, of course, we want to disable weak TLS on systems. It seems like a very prudent measure to make sure that we're using the latest version of that. And it's great until that breaks a line of business application or some other legacy application that hasn't been updated in years that doesn't support the latest TLS. And so that's the rub, the crux of the matter. How can we implement security effectively with minimal disruption to business operation? And I would say we would do this like we would disarm a bomb, very carefully. Changes should be made slowly. There should be careful planning behind what you want to implement. And then you should test that in a test VM, a disposable VM that you do not care about. It should be QA'd, and then it should be gradually rolled out to production in stages, a single test machine that you know has been backed up, and then incrementally to production. And we have another poll question that we're going to go ahead and pop up. What would you like to do more of in the security space? We talked about what you're doing today. What would the improvements be in your day-to-day operation versus what you are comparatively doing now? And with that, I'm going to go ahead and switch over to the Ninja portal here. And hopefully I'm sharing the right screen. Looks like it. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look. And let me hide my meeting controls. There we go. Let's go ahead and take a look at, first of all, how can we define whether or not we're in compliance with endpoint hardening? What are the steps that we want to take? What are the standards? And I'm going to go ahead and recommend a particular third-party tool here. This is an open source tool, and it is known as Hardening Kitty. It seems like there are many tools in this space that have odd names, and this is just one of them. But this is essentially an open source PowerShell tool that you can download onto your endpoints, and then this will give you a couple different options. What I would specifically recommend about this tool is the auditing. And so if we go down here, you can see it's very easy to generate a report here auditing against security standards. Now, which security standards are we auditing against? And you'll see in the lists right here that you have quite a few different ones to choose from. And so if we look here, we'll see that Michael Schneider, who's the creator of this, has his own personal ones right here. But then we can see from the German BSI, the Sisyphus project here, they have their own set of standards. CIS has their set of standards. The DoD has the STIGs right here. And then, of course, Microsoft has their own, the MSFT security baseline. And so these are all CSVs that essentially say, here's what the settings should be, and we're going to go ahead and compare what you have on this device against what the CSV is providing. And so that would give you a CSV of a report saying, here's everything that we checked for, and then here's how your device stacked up. And it generates that CSV locally on the device there. And so if we run a command like this down here, we can actually go ahead and audit, specify a particular finding list that we want to compare against, and we can go ahead and see what the results are. Now, I will say for this particular tool, I'm only recommending the audit mode. You'll see that there is the ability to remediate or go ahead and make changes to actually harden the endpoint here. Again, I would say you want to undertake this action very, very carefully. If we go down here, you'll see that they have a Hail Mary mode, which is essentially just going to go ahead and implement all that device hardening in one fell swoop. And again, that sounds great. I will tell you that this is almost certainly going to break something. I would be extremely surprised if you implemented even 80 to 90% of the recommendations that might be in some of these standards we've spoken about, and it would not cause problems. And that's something I really would like everyone to take away from today's conversation, is that this absolutely needs to be well thought out. It needs to be planned, and there needs to be careful testing involved to make sure that you don't impact business operation. As much as I wish that this could be a flip a switch and make it happen type deal, the fact is that what makes Windows a good operating system is its compatibility. And of course, that same compatibility can make it a potential target here. So it's definitely steps that you want to take, but you will need to take those steps with a good deal of care, because like I said, some of these settings that are being changed, that it is almost an absolute certainty that you are going to experience interruptions to service. So just something to very carefully take into account, and why I say I really am only recommending the auditing and reporting mode of the um, uh, of this hardening kitty tool that we're seeing here. This gives you an idea of where you might need to make these changes so that you can make your systems more secure. I really would not recommend just blatantly pushing out everything that they possibly say. Now, one of the links that we'll see here is that you do have the ability to essentially create your own. And so what is nice about this is, instead of utilizing the standards of a government entity, you can essentially pick and choose what you'd like to do here. And so if we come down here, you'll see all these various groupings of different security settings. You can go ahead and generate a CSV file right here, download that CSV file, and then you'd have the ability to refer to that when you're actually running the script on a device from Ninja across your environment. And that would be a very handy way um, to create your own standard that you want to judge off of, and not just sort of blatantly, go through and kind of, blow out everything and uh, potentially cause more issues than you're really solving. Now, from the GitHub page here, you can see this very helpful function here that actually downloads and installs the latest version, the latest stable version. I'll preface that. And so this is a good way you can copy and paste this right into Ninja, run it across your devices, and you'll have it installed, the PowerShell module installed, so that you can then go ahead and utilize it from other scripts. And so if I go into, actually, if we go back here, we can go down a little bit further and see one thing we're going to take advantage of, which is a scoring system here. And so here you can see that they do give you the ability to generate a score, giving you a rough idea of what your grade is with endpoint hardening. Now, I will say here, this scoring system should not be considered gospel here. I am not recommending that everybody should be at a 6 here, as much as that might be ideal. Again, I am weighing the practical realities of ensuring that we don't interrupt business operation here. So again, this is giving you a general idea, but not necessarily, we should say everybody should be at 4.5 or 5.0 or 6. This is absolutely a general guideline here. But it is a quick and easy way to tell where you need to focus on endpoints that might be more vulnerable than others. And so within Ninja, if we come in here, you'll see that I have created a custom field with endpoint hardening score. And so this will actually run the Hardening Kitty PowerShell module on a device. It'll parse the score, that the grade that it's given. And again, that grade is based off of the finding list that you are comparing against right here. So whatever CSV that you're using to dictate what the settings should be, that's where that grade is ultimately going to come from. And then if we go into my script library here, I have written a quick script that runs the hardening kitty in auditing mode. And then it will actually parse that score and write it into a custom field, so I can get a good at a glance view of what the overall health of my system is. And so if I search for this here, you'll see my little bit of PowerShell code here. We're capturing the results of the script in the output variable here. We are running it in auditing mode here. And in terms of the finding list, I'm actually going to go ahead and delete this. I'm not going to use a custom finding list, although I certainly could. And so I'll just use the default settings that they have here. And this is the important part right here, the verbose output. We're doing that so that we'll actually be able to parse what the score is. And then from here, you can see we're just looking for the score line. We're going to go ahead and using regex, go ahead and grab just the score, eliminate any other text, put that in an object, and then write that into our custom field down here. I will go ahead and make sure that this is available to anybody who wants to utilize it. This took me a little bit of time to figure out so that we could parse the score. Don't want anybody else to struggle with it. So this will be made available and sent out with the recording so that everybody has the ability to use it and kind of quickly see at a glance what the score is. So I'll make a change there, go ahead and do a quick save. And then if we go to my devices menu, you'll see that I have all these devices in here. And if I scroll over a little bit, oh, did I not? All right, I'll have to get a new column here. So if I create a column, or I created that custom field, and I can then go ahead and select the column, which will be the endpoint hardening score right there. I'll actually go ahead and remove some of these other ones just to give me a clearer view here. I love these customizable views that we've added in with the device search grid here. Makes it very easy to see just what I care about, like that. And so you can see here, if we look at our endpoint hardening score across these devices that I've run this script, you'll see that the scores are not great. And so, would we say, is this a cause for concern or not? And so really what we can do here is analyze where we're weakest, and then we can go ahead and run scripts across these devices to run the CSV files and create the CSV files, and then more directly find out what we need to do in order to improve the score on the device. Now, again, the score is a general idea of where you need to focus. I'm not saying that everybody should have a goal to get this score to 3.5 or 4 or anything like that. This is just giving you the general idea. You really want to parse the results of this a little bit more clearly or carefully, I'll say, so that you know exactly what you're going to do, what you're going to implement in order to remediate this. So this gives us a good view here. Now let's talk about the actual remediation here, the actual device hardening that we're going to do. Now I'm going to keep this pretty low level here. We're going to go to the administration section, into policies, and then inside of my tech PC policy here, I've created a scheduled automation. And if we go to that scheduled automation, it's called endpoint hardening. And this schedule is currently set to none. I have this set to none strictly so that I can call it on demand whenever I need it, but you might actually want to run this on a recurring basis. And the reason for that being is that this is great to run once immediately, but when you run once, you're only putting those settings in place at that particular time. Things can change over time. And so you might want to have this run every week, every month to ensure that all the devices are standardized to the settings that you would expect. Now let's go ahead and take a look at exactly what we are changing on the device. I think there are 9 scripts in here. So there are 9 things from the template library that we can quickly and easily import into Ninja. I was able to import all these in about 5-6 minutes. And then it probably took another 3 or 4 minutes to go ahead and get this automation set up. So roughly 10 minutes, I'm able to take 9 quick actions that are going to secure my endpoint and make it more difficult to compromise. So let's go ahead and review some of these. At the top here, we have something that is going to enable or disable the Windows firewall. Naturally, I want to enable it. However, there is an additional option here to block all inbound traffic, and I'm not going to take that action, again, because I'm concerned that this could impact business operation. Inbound traffic might be necessary, and this would exclude all applications that were previously whitelisted if I use the block all inbound connections. And so I'm not taking that action just because it's, again, probably going to cause me more problems than it's actually going to solve. Now, this is a good one. Disable auto run and autoplay on all drives. If you look at the findings, the finding lists, like we were seeing right here, they do give you the ability to see what is or the severity. So there might be a lot of low severity policies that we need to implement. There could certainly be some medium ones to implement, and then there are a few high severity ones. And a few of the high severity ones are generally this. It is the auto run capability. You plug in a USB drive and it's going to pop up and say, hey, how do you want to run this every single time? And so I am a big fan of disabling this across everybody. And so we can go ahead and just run that script as is, and this just gets rid of that auto run and autoplay functionality, just makes it a little bit safer, and again, remediates something that is a pretty highly ranked criteria for a lot of the standards that we've talked about so far. Of course, disabling PowerShell 2.0, would certainly recommend this. Pretty much any modern Windows build should ship with at least PowerShell 5.1. A lot of people these days are using PowerShell 7. So PowerShell 2.0 has certainly kind of gone the way of the wind, I think. But again, certainly if you, for whatever reason, might happen to have legacy applications that are utilizing that, certainly something you would want to consider. I think that's personally very rare, so I don't think that's something that many people would run into. But again, we're talking about sort of the niche edge cases here, simply based off of the fact that many people, again, have legacy applications that just have not been updated to work or operate as well-designed programs in a more modern tech infrastructure. Now below that, we have disabling SMB version 1. Again, this is very highly ranked on most of the standards for endpoint hardening, ensuring that you don't have the outdated uh, transfer mechanism in place. So would again highly recommend disabling that. Again, there could be certain legacy applications that utilize this, and so it could impact business. And same thing with this one right here, disabling weak TLS or SSL protocols. I have had some personal experience with this one, where yes, disabling weak TLS did end up causing issues in breaking a line of business application that just hadn't been updated to operate with 1.2. And so again, a good measure to take. This absolutely would strengthen your endpoint security. However, you need to balance that with the needs of the business and their ability to operate. So right here, we can enable or disable LM hash storage. Again, this is a pretty highly ranked criteria in many of the standards that I was looking at, disabling the storage of credentials in the LM or the LAN manager hash. Disabling NetBIOS. You can see here we have the ability to either go ahead and enable NetBIOS blanketly. We could disable NetBIOS across all network adapters, or we could go ahead and use the setting from the DHCP server, which is probably the better option because it's the spot where you would expect the NIC to pull the setting from is from DHCP. So in our case, we'll go ahead and utilize this. Of course, if you're operating in a static environment, then you would of course want to use the enable option. But again, keep in mind, if you have any particular tools that are using NetBIOS, then we want to go ahead and factor that in before making any particular changes. Which is not to say that when we find these sort of run-ins where security comes up against the needs of the business, it doesn't necessarily mean that that's the be-all end-all and that we're going to stop right in our tracks. It just means that we need to adapt. So is there a way to make that process more secure? Is there a way to upgrade the tool? There are certainly remediations here, but this is just sort of the first contact of when we could potentially have a security setting we're putting in place, and then having that potentially cause issues with the actual working environment. Two more settings here. You'll see here, setting the ISO mounting policy right here. Can they mount ISOs or not? Fairly standard. I imagine most people, this probably isn't a regular part of their job, so you can fairly safely disable that. And then finally, setting the UAC settings. This is the user account control. So just ensuring that you are set to at least Microsoft defaults here. You could, of course, amp this up to be a little bit more secure. You can see I am including a parameter here to set the prompt behavior to 5 for all administrator prompts, which is essentially meaning that admin credentials have to be entered for everything. And so right there we have 9 different scripts. Again, these are all from the template library. If I close out here and go into that template library, I can show off some of those scripts. And you'll see right here that I have all these scripts right here. I am really scratching the surface with what we have in here in terms of capability. You can see that this is a very long list. And this list of scripts encompasses workflow actions, things that are going to make your help desk staff be able to respond more quickly, something more out of the box. But then again, it also deals with device configuration here. And some of this device configuration might be just ensuring that the settings are what you want them to be. For example, I might want to change the power settings on a device. So right here, I can go ahead and change the power settings and sleep settings. And so while that doesn't really have an impact on the security of the device, it's just a nice operational tool to have in your toolbox. Checking for brute force login attempts, that's certainly security adjacent. Disabling SMB right there, disabling weak TLS. Now, when I come in to import this, over on the right-hand side, you'll see something called the script variable. And I'm a huge fan of this because it takes a very complex script like this and it makes it easy to implement. So in this case, you can see that we're just using the option to force a restart or not. And so if we check that box, we'll go ahead and actually restart the device after this script has ran in order for that change to take effect. But you can see here, this gives you the ability to add in additional data fields that you can input at the time you execute the script. So it makes it very easy to use. I just am a big fan of how that streamlines the workflow. You'll even see things like this, set event log max size. This is something we've covered on previous webinars where we talk about endpoint hardening. And this is something that gives you more insight after the fact. And so this is a great option to put in place so that you have more information, maybe when an attack happens or after the attack happens, you want to do a little after action report and have some more information. You're going to have that information. It's not potentially going to age out over time based off of the default Windows settings. And that's really what we're doing with a lot of these template library scripts here. Windows, again, is a very compatible operating system. However, that compatibility can, again, cause problems when somebody potentially malicious wants to connect to your system. And so we can take these actions so that a baseline image of Windows, the default OS installation, it might not have a lot of these security settings in place. And so this is a great way to ensure that even machines fresh from the factory are having these additional security settings put in place that makes them more difficult to compromise. So now we've created our script here. We can quickly run that across devices. Now, again, I mentioned at the top of the call that I was having some technical difficulties, and you can see some of those technical difficulties right here. We had some issues where all the VMs that I had set up for this particular webinar are offline. So I cannot actually run this live on the webinar for you. I apologize for that. But you can see here that I did do some testing. And so on these test machines, you can see where I was able to implement some of these security settings. This right here, I'd say, is a baseline image. So not a lot has been done on this device, but we have gone and taken additional steps on some of these other devices here, and we've seen that the score bumps up incrementally. And incrementally being a big term there, not something I want to skip over. And it's one of the reasons why I say the score that you're getting here, this is not the be all end all. This is not something that you should be sitting here trying to bump up. It's really designed to give you an idea of where you can focus on the least secure devices and bump up their security to make them more difficult to compromise. Now, how would we roll this out? So we actually have some of our settings in place, but you don't want to just, again, run this across every single person in the entire division. You want to slowly roll this out to devices over time. And so you can do this in a variety of ways. I personally think the best way is to utilize a child policy. And so we saw earlier that the Tech PC policy right here is the contains the policy or all the endpoint hardening scripts that we saw earlier. And so what I can do here is create a new policy. And we'll say this is test hardening devices right there. We'll select our role, which would be Windows desktops and laptops. And then below that, we'll see our parent policy. And this is an optional step, but it is one I'm going to take here. I want to inherit from the Tech PC policy that already has the settings that I care about. And so if I then save that, I can see that we have our test hardening devices policy here, all the exact same settings as the Tech PC policy. And then what we would do in this case is we would leave this checked. We would leave our endpoint hardening in place for our tech PC here. We might go ahead and change our schedule to operate on a schedule of daily, and maybe every day at noon, we're going to go ahead and run all of these scripts to ensure the devices are protected. I'm not saying that's the schedule you should use, but for the sake of brevity, we'll just go with that. And so we can go ahead and then save our change there. And then we'll go back to the tech PC policy. And our schedule automations, I can actually uncheck this, and this will disable it for my what we'll say is my main production policy. This is all the devices that I'm managing, or the vast majority of my workstations at least. And so I can say, well, the endpoint hardening policy and not in place for them, but because I've unchecked it, it still lives on the child policy that we just created. And so for those devices on that test policy, they'll run the endpoint hardening script, and all of our devices on a production policy would not run it. And at that point, it's very easy to just go ahead and identify where my test devices would be. For example, maybe this test device right here. And then from this devices menu, I can go ahead and move them to a different policy. And so in this case, I can go ahead and move them to the test hardening devices policy right there. And so now this is on a completely different policy. I can go ahead and show that real quick. You can see that Windows Server, Windows Workstation, but then right here we have our test hardening devices policy. And so I've moved them on over. Now I can let this sit for a little bit. I probably would want to go ahead and have somebody test out all the relevant line of business applications in place, sort of go through a couple days or weeks of normal operation. And at that point, I can start to roll it out to more people. It depends on what your ratios are. I personally am a fan of kind of going the 25%, 50%, 75%, and then everybody. That seems to work out pretty nicely. And so in this case, I might say, well, let's go ahead and start to roll this out. After this has been working successfully on this device for a few days or weeks, I can go ahead and say, let's roll this out to more devices. And I won't be particularly careful about this in terms of how I'm counting these devices. We'll just go ahead and select all these machines here, and then go ahead and move them over to the test hardening devices policy. And so now they are all in that policy. They would then continue to operate for a few days or a few weeks to ensure that everybody's still able to operate. Nobody is stopped in their tracks. Nobody is unable to do anything. And so assuming that proceeds, you could then go ahead and say, well, everybody else has basically the same device. There's no other individual settings that I need to worry about. And so you could go ahead and switch everybody over. Or you could continue to do a more incremental rollout. Now, when you are doing the complete rollout here, you would want to switch them back to sort of the main production policy. And so what I would do in this case is I'd go back into my policy settings. I would go to my main production policy, which in this case is called Tech PC. I would go to automations, and I would turn that automation back on. I'd set my schedule up however I want this to run, daily, weekly, or monthly. And I'll make my save change there. And at that point, I could really go ahead and delete that test policy. And so first, I would go ahead and find everybody on that policy, and I'd move them back to the main production policy, which again is Tech PC. So we can go ahead and switch that back real quick. And so at this point, I can go ahead and delete the policy. I don't need that test hardening policy anymore because I have implemented my changes. Now, I'm saying that and it just rolls off the tongue, right? However, we mentioned that this is something you're going to probably do gradually in steps. This is not something that you're going to do all in one fell swoop. So in fact, you might actually keep that test policy and you might roll out a different set of changes. So if we come back into the template library, we could go ahead and find some additional security measures that we might want to put in place. So for example, we might want to find that event log size template library script, and we can import that into our environment. We might want to find some other scripts that we want to add, essentially just additional layers of security, additional settings that we want to change to try and provide a greater degree of security and prevent people from compromising our endpoints. And so in this case, I might come back down to policies here, go into my test hardening devices policy here. Actually, I did that wrong. I want to go to my tech PC policy. And I might create a second scheduled automation. And so this might be endpoint hardening too. Again, we'll keep our schedule there. And then I can go ahead and add in my additional scripts here where I want to do more. And so this could be the event size log that I mentioned earlier, right there. Can set the max size or the log name. So in this case, I'll go ahead and do security. And I can add that in there. If I had additional scripts that I wanted to utilize, I could go ahead and include them in here. Now, let's talk about what other options we have. And I mentioned this open source tool here. This is great for auditing and reporting, but I wasn't a huge fan of it for remediation because it felt like it was a little difficult to pick and choose the exact settings that you wanted to roll back. However, this tool has a weird name, and I found another tool that also has a weird name, privacy.sec. And this is actually something that is going to go ahead and create PowerShell scripts that are a little bit more clear about what settings exactly you're changing. And so this is a phenomenal way to go ahead and expand some additional endpoint hardening options here. So you'll see that these are broken down by a variety of categories. A lot of them do deal with privacy. I'm specifically focusing on the security improvements right here. And so here you'll see that there's some additional settings that we can go ahead and push out. This could be enabling protection against some known bugs. It could be disabling unsafe features like we already have with disabling PowerShell 2.0 and SMBv1. It could be enabling data execution prevention, DEP, disabling autoplay and auto run, which we've already done. It could be disabling the remote assistance feature that is built into Windows, disabling the storage of the LAN manager password hashes, which we also have already done. Disabling the elevated, always install with elevated privileges in Windows Installer. Then we do start to get into some things that could potentially cause issues. Disabling basic authentication usage in WinRM. That could impact maybe other PowerShell scripts that you're running that utilize WinRM. And you would have to upgrade those scripts in order to work with the proper authentication for WinRM. Disabling the anonymous enumeration of shares is a good security practice, but again, it could cause issues if you are using those shares anonymously. Now, I won't go over all of these, but this does give you PowerShell scripts that are a little bit more one-to-one about the exact nature of the change that you want to make. And then you can see that there is an option here to revert. And so if I wanted to revert the disable anonymous enumeration of shares setting, well, I can go ahead and click that option, and it's very easy for me to then go ahead and roll that setting back. Now you'll see here at the top here that I can select none, but I can also say, well, give me all of the standard ones. And so that shows you a lot of the standard security improvements that people might put in place, like disabling the unsafe features we saw earlier, disabling autoplay and auto run, remote assistance, disabling the lock screen camera access. So a lot of these very easy to put in place. I can copy that code like so, come back into Ninja. And then I can go ahead and import that particular script. And so you can see here, very clear all the changes that are being made. This is quite a long script. You can see how many lines there are here. But it's very clear. It's actually not in PowerShell. It is in Batch. And so this makes it very easy for me to go ahead and push out all these changes. It's another resource that I have. And again, I think that's the key here is having additional layers of security, having additional tools. That's always going to help you create a stronger security posture. Now, I believe, let's see if I can figure out how to get my meeting controls back here. I believe we had a few questions. Right, we have a, this is a question from Rusty. We have a consultant telling my local government accounts the best method to address this topic is to implement Microsoft Azure AD. And yes, I would classify Azure AD or really any IDP as implementing stronger user access controls. And so I think maybe there's I won't say a mix-up, but we've sort of looked at traditional AD or domain-based deployments using a GPO as being a method to implement a lot of security settings. And I'd say that with Azure AD, it's really about user identity protection. And so it's giving your users a way to authenticate and log in, but it's not necessarily going to address the device hardening aspects here. So I'd say that that's certainly a good practice, is having an IDP in place, having your users in a place where you can centrally manage them. That's hugely beneficial. However, I don't think that Azure AD alone is going to be the be all end all here. It is like endpoint hardening, like EDR, it is a tool in your security stack, but it is not all inclusive. Do you recommend a push of audit results into custom fields or other reporting methods? Yes, that would be phenomenal. However, what I would say about that is that the audit results themselves are going to be determined by what you care about. So based off of your finding list, what you want to look at, that's what is going to determine those results. And then yes, you can absolutely write those into a custom field. I have not done that yet. I just did the scores themselves. But the Hardening Kitty tool that I've mentioned here, that does write into a CSV, and a PowerShell script can very easily parse that CSV and then write that as a table essentially into a custom field in Ninja. We do have WYSIWYG custom fields, and you can see down here, this would give you up to 200,000 characters worth that you can write data into, and you of course can create multiple WYSIWYG fields here as well. So if you did want to write the output, I would strongly recommend using a WYSIWYG field here, just because of the length of the results that you're likely to get back, and because that does give you the best formatting. So yes, this is absolutely a good way to implement that. Now, traditionally within Ninja, we'd say that the WYSIWYG field would be for visual display purposes within Ninja. But because it also has the 200,000 characters, you could also take that CSV and actually pipe the results into a custom field in JSON. And so I think that's very beneficial, because you probably might not want to look at this on a per device level. You have to keep that in mind, but I'm imagining that most people want to look at this at scale. So if you actually take the results of that CSV that the Hardening Kitty tool generates locally, you put that in JSON into a Ninja custom field. That then gives you the ability to easily pull from all the custom fields that have data in them in Ninja and actually create a more centralized report that shows you all the devices that you've run the script across, that is giving you the capability to, again, manage all that and view that data a little bit more centrally, rather than having to go to each individual device and say, well, here's the CSV, here's the CSV, here's the CSV. So yes, I think for data display purposes, with the WYSIWYG fields here are great. And I also think that storing the information in JSON in a custom field is a great way to retrieve that data via our API and give you kind of more of a bird's eye view, rather than looking at each device individually. Phil had another question here about where some of these action scripts are coming from, and the scripts are coming from the template library right here. So pretty much everything that I have shown today has come from the template library. I think the one exception to that would be obviously the third-party tools I mentioned, Hardening Kitty, as well as privacy.sexy. And then, sorry, I thought I could keep a straight face and I could not. And then obviously the script that I customized that will actually run Hardening Kitty and actually parse the results and put that into a custom field that will be made accessible to everybody. It'll be sent out with the recording. So that's really the only custom thing I've done here. Everything else is either from the template library or is easily accessible on GitHub. Let's look here for some additional questions. Alex, I just answered Alex's question. Yes, the script to set the endpoint hardening custom field score will be sent out with the recording. Oh. It says, is there instruction in the dojo for compiling of reporting that you were describing? I actually don't know if there is a post in the dojo that actually talks about pulling data from custom fields and kind of doing that more broad-based reporting. But I think that makes sense. So I don't have anything available for you now, Phil, but I think maybe in the coming days or maybe next week, I'll have some time to go ahead and put something together that shows retrieving information in JSON from a custom field and using that to build out a report. So nothing today on that, but hopefully we'll have a resource here in a few weeks or two. Does creating a role custom field provide more granularity for rollout? I wouldn't necessarily say creating a role custom field would add additional levels of granularity for this. The role-based custom fields are really in how you assign them to different types of devices. So that's really only going to come into place if you or maybe don't want to run this across servers. Maybe you only want to track across workstations. That's really the only thing I can think of where you might want to use a role-based custom field. So it's certainly fine to use a role-based custom field rather than a global custom field like I did. It's just in the difference in how you assign them. But I don't really know if it's going to give you any additional granularity in how you roll this out. That's really going to be determined more by the policy structure. I am seeing some requests for Mac OS. I don't have anything prepared for Mac OS for this particular webinar. I did want to focus primarily on Windows devices because that is the bulk of what is being managed by Ninja, but also because of the difference in how those operating systems are designed for the most part. I would say that generally Windows is more of an open operating system when it's out of the box. Maybe like to use maybe electrical engineering terminology, it's normally open. And then something like Mac OS, it tends to be a little bit more normally closed, meaning that it's more of a closed shop and that it's actually a little bit more difficult to make some of the changes that we're talking about here today on Windows systems. It's just much more difficult to make those on Mac OS. So this really was more about Windows endpoint hardening. I apologize that I don't really have anything on Mac OS, but I seemed like Windows was the more pressing topic, but certainly something that we might revisit later and do maybe more of a Mac OS specific session. All right, let me stop my share real quick. I know we're kind of coming to the end of time here, and there is a giveaway, so I wanted to make sure that we did get to that. But first, a brief sales pitch. NinjaOne is #1 rated across many review sites for support. I always say that we might make technology, but this is a people business. And so we think we have pretty good people here at Ninja. For any of those listening who are not currently Ninja partners, we have free and unlimited training and onboarding with our sales engineering team. I was formerly a member of that. I think it's a wonderful tool, wonderful resource to have to be able to talk over some of these discussions with somebody who knows the NinjaOne platform intimately like a sales engineer. We never charge for any of that training and onboarding. We offer free and unlimited support, and we, again, are #1 rated, and you also get a dedicated account manager here at NinjaOne. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. Again, the recording and some of the resources that I've mentioned here today are all going to be included in an email that gets sent out probably tomorrow, hopefully tomorrow. But if you have any other questions and you would like to reach out to me, jeff.hunter@ninjaone.com. I'm happy to keep the conversation going. I know we kind of get locked in to only about an hour or so here. So yes, please feel free to reach out if you have any questions. I look forward to hearing from any of those who do have questions. And now we'll go to the main event. I will invite Andrew to come out, and he is going to announce a giveaway for the webinar today.
Hello, everyone. My name's Andrew, and I'm the Marketing Programs Coordinator at Ninja, and I'll be announcing today's webinar prize giveaway. So this person will be able to choose between an Xbox X, an Uni pizza oven, Sonos Move 2 speaker, or a gaming chair. And the winner of today's prize is Kevin Labar. Everyone drop a huge congratulations in the chat. Kevin, please keep an eye out in the following days for an email from us to claim your prize.
Thank you very much, Andrew, and congratulations. I say this every time we do one of these giveaways. I'm a huge fan of the Uni pizza oven, and I would highly recommend it for anybody who likes pizza or just likes cooking. My favorite thing to cook in that thing is actually fish or like roasted veggies, because it's basically just an oven, right? With that, let's see if we have a few more questions that we can get to in the time we have left. Question from David. Can we see a list of antivirus software packages that NinjaOne interfaces with or works well with? That's a great question. So we do have a list of integrations. I'll go ahead and say that the integrations page that you see on our website, ninjaone.com/integrations, is probably going to be the best place to see that here. Let me share my screen so you can also see that. So this shows you all our various integrations. We do have integrations with SentinelOne, with WebRoot, with Bitdefender Gravity Zone, as well as CrowdStrike. So those are all tools that we have integrations with. That being said, we also have the ability to alert on anything that utilizes Windows Security Center. Now that's really only with the Windows workstations, because that's the only type of device that's going to have Windows Security Center built in. Windows servers aren't going to have that functionality. But if we look at a workstation policy, you'll see you'll have the ability to alert when antivirus is missing. So on the antivirus health, is antivirus missing, disabled, outdated? Do we want to ignore Microsoft Defender, not treat that as a legitimate antivirus? And then finally, a duration. So if we are having unhealthy AV for 1 hour, 2 hours, after that time, we'll go ahead and create an alert. You also get the ability to see this at the device level. And so regardless of if it's an integration or not, if the device is using Windows Security Center like a workstation, and it does have an AV installed, even something like Defender, you'll be able to see that from the details section. And so if we go down to the antivirus section, you'll see we have Defender listed, and that is currently set to off because when SentinelOne was installed via the integration right below it, that disabled Windows Defender and took over as the primary antivirus. Again, this just uses Windows Security Center, so any AV that utilizes WSC is going to be seen and visible here, and you also get this in the form of our reporting as well. And so you also get some information there. So hopefully, David, that answers your question. CrowdStrike, SentinelOne, WebRoot, Bitdefender are ones we have integrations with today, but you're not really limited by that. Very easy to deploy and then report on antivirus as long as it's using Windows Security Center. See if I have anything else I can answer real quick here. Question from Ronnie. Are these controls in Ninja more difficult to add when already using Azure AD? Really with Azure AD, that's primarily going to be just the user portion of that. It's the user logging in to the device and kind of controlling their access to the device. This is really, I guess, more in the nature of Intune. So if you are using Intune and you're pushing policies for these particular settings, there's a possibility there could be, some duplication of the work if you're also doing this through Ninja, but I don't think there would really be a particular conflict. Generally with Ninja, the only thing that might conflict with a group policy or with Intune is going to be around patching, because the GPO would prevent Ninja from being able to patch. So no, I don't think that this conflicts with Azure AD, I think it's a pretty good method to supplement it. And with that, I think we are unfortunately at time. So thank you everybody for attending today. Really appreciate it. Again, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out, jeff.hunter@ninjaone.com. Thank you and hope you have a good rest of your day.